Hey there, and welcome to True Scary Stories. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That helps YouTube know you love creepy stories, and it'll keep sending more your way.
3 true Texas horror stories. What's going on, everyone? Tonight, I've got 3 stories for you, all taking place in the Lone Star State, Texas. Now, when most people think of Texas, they think of cowboys, barbecue, wide open spaces. But the thing about those wide open spaces, sometimes there's nothing around for miles. No one to hear you scream, no one to help when things go wrong. These 3 stories were sent to me by subscribers who experienced things in Texas that they'll never forget. Things that still keep them up at night. So turn off your lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into tonight's stories. Story 1. The Rest Stop on I-10. So this first story comes from a guy named Derek. Back in 2019, Derek was 23 years old and driving from San Antonio to El Paso to visit his older brother, who'd just moved out there for work. Now, if you've never made that drive, it's brutal. We're talking almost 9 hours of nothing but flat desert highway, scattered gas stations, and the occasional tumbleweed. Derek left around 2 p.m., figuring he'd get there by 11 that night. The drive started off normal enough, music playing, windows down, that endless stretch of I-10 rolling out in front of him. But as the sun started to set and the sky turned that deep orange color you only see in the desert, Derek started getting tired, really tired. He'd been up since 5 a.m. that morning and only had a few hours of sleep the night before. Around 9:30 p.m., somewhere between Junction and Fort Stockton, Derek's eyes were starting to close on him. He knew he needed to pull over. That's when he saw the sign, Rest Stop 2 miles. Now, Derek had passed this rest stop before on previous trips, but he'd never actually stopped there. It was one of those older facilities, the kind that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 80s. But he didn't have much choice. He needed to splash some water on his face, maybe walk around for a few minutes to wake himself up. He took the exit and pulled into the rest stop parking lot. There were a few overhead lights, but half of them were burnt out, casting long shadows across the pavement. Derek counted maybe 4 other vehicles in the lot. A semi-truck parked way in the back, an old pickup truck, a minivan, and 1 sedan. The building itself was this squat concrete structure with men's and women's bathrooms on either side, and a covered area in the middle with some vending machines and a map of Texas behind scratched plexiglass. Everything had this yellowish, sick glow from the fluorescent lights inside. Derek parked, got out, and stretched. The air was cold now that the sun was down, and it was dead quiet except for the distant hum of the highway. He walked toward the men's bathroom, his footsteps echoing. When he pushed open the bathroom door, the smell hit him immediately. That harsh combination of industrial cleaner and something else, something stale and unpleasant. The lights were flickering, making this awful buzzing sound. There were 3 stalls, 2 urinals, and a row of sinks with a cloudy mirror above them. Derek was completely alone in there. He went to the sink, turned on the water, which came out brown for the first few seconds before running clear, and splashed his face. The cold water helped a little. He looked at himself in the mirror, looking tired, and that's when he heard it. From inside the last stall. Breathing. Heavy, labored breathing. Derek froze, water still dripping from his face. "Hello?" he called out. No response. Just that breathing, steady and deep. Now, Derek figured maybe someone was in there, maybe they were sick or something, but something felt wrong. The breathing didn't sound natural. It sounded forced, almost like someone was deliberately breathing loudly. "Hey man, you all right in there?" Derek tried again. Nothing. But the breathing continued. Derek grabbed some paper towels, dried his face quickly, and started backing toward the door. He wasn't about to investigate. As he reached for the door handle, the breathing stopped. Just stopped. Complete silence except for that buzzing light. Then he heard the stall door creak, slowly, like someone was pushing it open inch by inch. Derek didn't wait to see who or what came out. He shoved through the door and walked quickly back to his car. His heart was pounding now, and he told himself he was just being paranoid, that it was probably just some trucker who was half asleep or something. He got in his car, locked the doors, and his hands were shaking so bad he could barely get the key in the ignition. When the engine finally started, he floored it out of that parking lot, gravel spraying behind him as he merged back onto I-10. For the next hour and a half until he reached Fort Stockton, Derek kept checking his rearview mirror, convinced he'd see headlights following him. He never went back to that rest stop, and to this day, he wonders who left that note on his windshield, and who or what was in that bathroom with him.
Story 2. The Abandoned House in Marfa. This second story takes place in Marfa, Texas, a tiny town out in West Texas known for these mysterious lights people see in the desert. A lot of artists live there now, but it's still pretty isolated. This story was sent in by a woman named Ashley, and it happened to her and 3 friends during a camping trip in 2021. Ashley and her friends, Mike, Jenna, and Chris, had driven out to Marfa specifically to see the famous Marfa lights. They set up camp in a designated area just outside town, planning to stay for 2 nights. The first day and night went great. They saw some weird lights in the distance, took photos, sat around the campfire telling stories. But on the second day, they decided to do some exploring. They'd heard there were some cool abandoned buildings and old ranch houses scattered around the area, so they packed some water and snacks and set off on a hike around mid-morning. They'd been walking for maybe 45 minutes when they came across it, an old house sitting by itself about half a mile from the main road. It was a single-story, ranch-style home, probably built in the 50s or 60s, with peeling white paint and a sagging roof. All the windows were either broken or boarded up, and there was a rusted-out pickup truck in the driveway, probably hadn't moved in decades. "We should check it out," Mike said. He was always the adventurous one, the first one to suggest doing something risky. Ashley wasn't so sure. "I don't know, man. This is someone's property. We could get in trouble." But Chris and Jenna were already walking toward it, and Ashley didn't want to be left alone, so she followed. The front door was unlocked. Actually, it was slightly ajar, like it had been blown open by the wind and just never closed. Mike pushed it open all the way, and they stepped inside. The smell hit them immediately. Dust, decay, and something else. Something sweet and rotten. The interior was trashed. Furniture overturned, broken glass everywhere, graffiti on the walls. Someone, maybe multiple people, had definitely been squatting there at some point. There were old beer cans, cigarette butts, even a sleeping bag in the corner of what used to be the living room. "This place is creepy as hell," Jenna said, her voice echoing slightly. They explored for a few minutes, taking photos, laughing nervously. There was a kitchen with cabinets hanging open, a bathroom with a toilet that was just indescribably gross, and 2 bedrooms at the back of the house. That's when things got weird. In the second bedroom, the one at the very back, the door was closed. Mike reached for the handle and turned it. The door stuck at first, then swung open with a loud creak. The room was different from the rest of the house. It was clean, not spotless, but noticeably cleaner. The walls had been recently painted, dark red, the color of dried blood. There was a mattress on the floor in the center of the room with a sleeping bag on top of it. And on the walls, photos. Dozens of them. Polaroids and printed photos, all tacked up with thumbtacks or tape. And they were all photos of people. Different people. Men, women, some looked like they were taken from a distance. Others looked like posed portraits. None of them were smiling. "What the fuck?" Chris whispered. Ashley's skin was crawling. "We need to leave, now." But Mike was already walking into the room, looking closer at the photos. "These are all dated," he said, pointing to writing at the bottom of each photo. "This one's from last month, and this one's from 3 days ago." 3 days ago. Someone was here 3 days ago. Someone might still be here. That's when they heard it. From somewhere in the house, a door closing. Loud, deliberate. They all froze. "Did you close the front door when we came in?" Ashley asked Mike. "No, I left it open." They stood there in complete silence, listening. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps moving through the house, coming toward them. "Go, go, go!" Mike hissed, and they bolted out of the bedroom. Ashley glanced back as they ran through the hallway and saw him, a tall figure standing in the shadows of the living room, not moving, just watching them run. They burst out the back door of the house and ran. They didn't stop running until they reached the road, lungs burning, legs aching. When they finally turned back to look, the house sat there in the distance, quiet and still, like nothing had happened. They hiked back to their campsite as fast as they could, packed up their stuff, and left that same day. Didn't even stay for the second night. On the drive home, they talked about calling the police, telling them about the photos, but what would they even say? That they were trespassing and saw something creepy? Ashley still thinks about those photos, all those faces. She looked up missing persons cases from that area when she got home, and she swears some of those faces looked familiar. She never found anything concrete, but she can't shake the feeling that whoever was in that house was collecting something or someone. And she wonders how many of those people in the photos made it home.
Story 3. The Thing in the Oil Field. All right, this last story is probably the strangest one of the three. It comes from a guy named Marcus, who used to work on an oil rig out in the Permian Basin in West Texas. This happened back in 2018, during a night shift. Now, if you don't know, oil rigs are loud, bright, industrial places. Lots of machinery, lots of people, lots of activity. But the area around them, especially at night, pitch black, empty. Just flat desert for miles in every direction. Marcus is working as a roughneck, which basically means he did the hard manual labor on the rig. It was brutal work, 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, in extreme heat or cold depending on the season. But the money was good, and Marcus needed it. He was 26 at the time, trying to save up enough to move back to Houston, where his family was. The crew he worked with was pretty tight-knit. You kind of have to be when you're spending 12 hours a day in the middle of nowhere with the same group of guys. There was Ray, the foreman, old school, been doing this for 25 years. Tommy, who was around Marcus's age and became his closest friend on the rig. And about 8 other guys, all good workers, all just trying to make a living. This particular night, Marcus was working the night shift that started at 7 p.m. and went until 7 a.m. It was early October, so the nights were getting colder, and by midnight, Marcus could see his breath in the air. The crew was about halfway through the shift when one of the pumps started acting up. The foreman, Ray, told Marcus and Tommy to go check it out. "Pump 6 is making that grinding noise again," Ray said, wiping oil off his hands with a rag. "Probably just needs the belt adjusted, but go take a look. Radio me if it's anything serious." The pump in question was located about 300 yards from the main rig, connected by a dirt road that was really just 2 tire tracks in the sand. Marcus and Tommy grabbed some tools and a heavy-duty flashlight, the kind that weighs about 5 pounds and could double as a weapon, and started walking. The rig lights faded behind them as they got farther away, and soon they were surrounded by darkness except for the beam of the flashlight cutting through the night. The temperature had dropped significantly, and Marcus pulled his jacket tighter around him. Above them, the sky was absolutely packed with stars. One of the perks of being out in the middle of nowhere with no light pollution. "I hate this part of the job," muttered Tommy, his breath visible in the cold air. "Being out here alone at night gives me the creeps." Marcus agreed. but he didn't say anything. There was something about the desert at night that felt watchful, like the darkness itself was alive and paying attention to you. They reached the pump, which was making this weird grinding noise, almost like metal scraping against metal. Tommy crouched down to inspect it, while Marcus held the flashlight, illuminating the machinery. "Yeah, it's the belt," he said, pulling out a wrench. "Give me like 5 minutes and I'll have it." That's when Marcus heard it. From somewhere out in the darkness, beyond the reach of the flashlight, a voice. Faint, distant, calling out. "Hey. Help. Please." Marcus's head snapped up and he turned toward the sound, sweeping the flashlight beam across the empty desert. Nothing but sand, scrub brush, and darkness. "Did you hear that?" Tommy stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Hear what?" "Someone's calling for help." They both went quiet, listening. The only sounds were the grinding of the pump and the distant hum of the main rig. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, "Help me. Please. I'm hurt." It was a man's voice, weak and strained, like someone in genuine pain. It was coming from the east, maybe 100 yards away, out in the open desert where there was absolutely nothing. No roads, no structures, nothing. "Shit," Tommy said, his face suddenly serious. "Someone might have had an accident out there. Maybe a truck broke down or something. We got to check it out." Marcus hesitated. Something felt off. They were in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was 40 miles away, and the only road that came out this far was the access road to their rig. How would someone even get out here? And if they'd driven, where was their vehicle? But he couldn't just ignore it. If someone was hurt, they needed help. People died out in this desert all the time. Dehydration, exposure, accidents. If there was even a chance someone was in trouble, they had a responsibility to help. "Okay," Marcus said. "But we stay together, and if anything seems weird, we head straight back." They started walking toward the voice, Marcus sweeping the flashlight beam back and forth across the desert floor. "Hello! Where are you? Keep talking so we can find you." "Over here. Please hurry. I'm hurt." The voice sounded closer now, which made sense if they were walking toward it. But Marcus couldn't shake this feeling in his gut. Something was wrong. The voice sounded almost flat, like someone reading lines without emotion, despite the words themselves being desperate. They kept walking. 50 yards, 75 yards, 100 yards. They should have reached whoever it was by now. But there was nothing. Just flat, empty desert, stretching out in every direction. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus said, stopping. He turned in a circle, shining the flashlight all around them. "Where the hell is he? We should have found him by now." Tommy looked uneasy, his eyes darting around nervously. "Maybe we're going the wrong direction. Maybe the sound is bouncing weird off the ground or something." "Help me." Both of them froze, because that time, the voice hadn't come from ahead of them. It had come from behind them, right behind them, close enough that Marcus could have sworn he felt breath on the back of his neck.
Marcus spun around, shining the flashlight in the direction of the voice. The beam landed on something standing about 20 feet away, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped. His breath caught in his throat, and his entire body went rigid with a primal, instinctive fear he'd never experienced before. It looked like a person at first glance. It was roughly human-shaped, standing upright on 2 legs. But it was wrong. All wrong. Its proportions were off. Too tall, maybe 7 feet, and too thin, like someone had taken a human and stretched them vertically. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands that looked too large, with fingers that seemed too long. Its skin, if you could call it that, was pale. Not like human pale, but pale like something that had never seen the sun, almost grayish white. And it was slick-looking, like it was covered in a thin layer of oil or moisture that reflected the flashlight beam. But the worst part, the part that made Marcus's stomach turn and his mind struggle to process what he was seeing, was its face. It didn't have one. Just smooth, blank skin where a face should be. No eyes, no nose, no features at all. Just that pale, featureless expanse, except for one thing. A dark, vertical slit where a mouth might be, like someone had cut a line down the center of where its face should have been. And it was moving toward them. Not walking. Not exactly. Its movements were wrong, jerky and stilted, like a puppet being pulled on strings by someone who didn't quite know how humans moved. "Run," Tommy whispered, his voice shaking. "Run." They turned and ran, full sprint back toward the rig. Marcus's boots pounded against the hard-packed sand, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind them he could hear it following, not running but moving fast, impossibly fast. It made this awful sound with each movement, like wet footsteps slapping against the ground, accompanied by that voice still calling out in that same pained tone. "Help me, please, help me." But the voice was all wrong now. Too deep, too distorted, like it was being played through a broken speaker or coming from somewhere deep underwater. And it was coming from right behind them, so close Marcus was terrified that if he looked back he'd see it reaching for him with those two long fingers. Marcus didn't dare look back. He just ran, his lungs burning, his legs pumping as fast as they could go. Tommy was right beside him, and Marcus could hear him gasping for air, muttering, "Oh God, oh God, oh God," under his breath. The lights of the rig were getting closer, closer, those beautiful, bright, industrial lights that suddenly seemed like the most wonderful thing Marcus had ever seen. Safety, civilization, other people. They burst back into the lit area of the rig, and Tommy immediately grabbed Ray, the foreman, and started babbling about what they'd seen, his words tumbling over each other in a panic. Marcus bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His entire body was shaking, adrenaline, fear, shock, all of it hitting him at once. He finally worked up the courage to look back toward the darkness, toward the area they'd just come from. Nothing. Just empty desert. The darkness seemed thicker somehow, more impenetrable, but there was nothing visible. Whatever it was gone, or at least it wasn't following them anymore. It was like there was an invisible line where the rig lights ended, and that thing wouldn't or couldn't cross it. Ray looked at both of them like they'd lost their minds at first. "You're telling me you saw some kind of, what? Creature out there?" "I know how it sounds," Marcus said, his voice still shaky. "But I'm telling you, there was something out there, something that it's not human, Ray, it's not human." Ray's expression changed when he saw how genuinely terrified they both were. This wasn't a prank. He'd seen guys mess around before, try to scare the new workers, but this was different. These were two grown men, good workers, and they looked like they'd seen death itself. He radioed the other workers, told everyone to stay within the lidded perimeter of the rig for the rest of the night. No one goes out alone. No one goes beyond the lights. And if anyone heard voices calling out from the darkness, they were to ignore them completely and report it immediately. The rest of the shift was tense. Marcus couldn't focus on his work. Every time he got close to the edge of the lit area of the rig, he'd feel his skin crawl, like he was being watched from the darkness just beyond the lights. Marcus asked some of the older workers the next day if they'd ever experienced anything like that. Most of them brushed it off, told him he was seeing things, that the night shift plays tricks on your mind. But one old-timer, a guy named Earl who'd been working oil fields in Texas for 30 years, just nodded slowly when Marcus told him the story. "Yeah," Earl said, quietly, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. "I've heard stories. Things out in the desert, things that mimic, things that call out to you, try to lure you away from the light. Old-timers say it's desert spirits or skinwalkers or who knows what. Native folks around here have stories about them going back hundreds of years. But I'll tell you this, and you better listen good, you don't go toward the voices. You never, ever go toward the voices. Because once you're far enough from the light, once you're alone out there in the dark, they've got you." "What do they want?" Marcus asked. Earl finally looked at him, and his eyes were deadly serious. "I don't know, and I don't want to know.
I've worked these fields for 3 decades, and I've heard those voices calling out probably a dozen times. I've never once gone to investigate, and I'm still here. The guys who did go, some of them came back different. Wouldn't talk about what they saw. Quit within a week. Others... He paused. Others didn't come back at all. Marcus quit that job 2 months later. He couldn't take it anymore. Every night shift he'd be on edge, jumping at every sound, terrified he'd hear that voice again. He still works in the oil industry, but he refuses to work night shifts, and he refuses to work anywhere near the Permian Basin. Because whatever that thing was that night, it knew how to sound human. It knew exactly how to make you want to help, how to exploit that basic human instinct to aid someone in distress. And Marcus is convinced, absolutely convinced, that if they'd walked just a little bit farther into that darkness, if they'd gotten just a little bit more separated from the rig lights, they wouldn't have made it back. He still has nightmares about it, about that blank, featureless face, about those 2 long arms, about that voice calling out from the darkness, "Help me, help me." And sometimes, late at night when he's lying in bed, he swears he can still hear it. So there you have it. 3 stories from Texas, a state that's a lot bigger and a lot stranger than most people realize. Wide open spaces, endless highways, and miles of darkness where anything could be lurking. Derek never went back to that rest stop. Ashley never found out who was living in that house. And Marcus still has nightmares about that voice calling out to him in the dark. If you've got a scary story you'd like to share, send it to me. You never know. It might end up in the next video. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And remember, not everything in Texas is bigger. Some things are just wrong.